Hi, in this video I'm going to talk about the languaging around panic attacks, those words themselves, and are there more helpful words we can use to describe this, and what's the impact there, and how this can actually be really different and quite an individual thing for different people, right? Okay, so you might have heard perhaps some people describing panic attacks in different ways, using different words of language, like for example surges or adrenaline surges, or just high adrenaline or high anxiety, or there's different languaging used sometimes, and sometimes this can be almost to shift the experience of the panic attack by shifting the language, because of course we're very impacted by what we call things, right? And to a certain extent you could argue that if I'm calling something a panic attack, that sounds terrible, right? That sounds a bit like someone's attacking me from the outside, and it also quite sounds like, perhaps not to everyone, but to some people, that might sound like something that is happening to me, right? Whereas like a more NLP approach would be that I am doing anxiety, right? I am either consciously or unconsciously, a lot of the time it's unconsciously, selecting this, I'm choosing this anxiety, and that means, thankfully, I can choose something else. I can make another choice, and that can have, a really powerful impact reasonably quickly, right? So it's kind of this idea of it being empowering. Now, to some people, that feels kind of insulting or diminishing or a bit annoying, right? To be like, you're choosing the panic attack. I'm not choosing the bloody panic attack. Thank you very much. It's just happening, right? And it absolutely, I totally get it, that it would definitely feel like it is a thing that is happening, right? So, the aim here is not to diminish anyone or to dismiss anything, right? Panic attacks are really, really difficult to experience. I would absolutely, I'm sure they are, right? I've never actually had a panic attack, so I don't know personally. But, from having them described by loads and loads of different clients, they sound appalling sometimes, or at least very uncomfortable. The lower level and the very high level of panic attack sounds horrific, right? Like one of the worst things you can experience. I just haven't had panic attacks because I haven't ever had a very high level of anxiety. I have had quite severe depression earlier on in my life. But panic attacks are just not one of those things that I've experienced. However, as I say, I fully recognise that they can be horrific, awful things to experience. So I am absolutely, and no one else is trying to diminish that in any way, the suffering there, right? Or take that away. At the same time, it's true, right? That it's your body doing it. It's not like an alien comes across and like casts a spell on you and gives you a panic attack, right? Although, of course, sometimes they can have been, developed in relation to things that other people have done or things that have happened that are outside our control, absolutely. But in that moment of you panicking, it's your body doing it and your mind doing it. And that means that you do have control, right? Ultimately. Although it's going to take some retraining, it's going to take some processing, as in terms of all the things that I've been talking about in these videos, right? It's not like you can just decide, tomorrow to not have panic attacks anymore, right? It's not as simple as that at all. And the processes and techniques that you learn that I've been talking about in terms of hypnosis will probably only take so far, and probably to end panic attacks altogether, probably some form of therapy is needed, right? To kind of remove the stored negative emotion from trauma from the past, right? In terms of moving away from them altogether. However, for some people, the language shift can be useful. For some people not. So if it doesn't feel useful to you, don't do it, right? Use all the other stuff in all the other videos. But for some people, it immediately makes it feel easier or less frightening to use something like adrenaline surge, right? Or just surge, or having a funny moment, whatever, right? So if whatever works, right? Like almost maybe experiment a bit with calling it different things in your head and see if that helps a bit, right? And I don't mean to just do that. Of course, do that in combination with all of the other suggestions in these videos. But that's maybe not to be overlooked as part of your solution here, right? On the other hand, sometimes people can find the words panic attack quite useful. And I've seen that too. So sometimes someone might come to me and describe an experience they're having, and I say, have you heard of this idea of panic attacks? And they either haven't ever heard that term or phrase, or they're like, oh no, but that's not what I'm having, because panic attacks are this, right? And they might think that panic attacks are only, someone who is under the table in a ball rocking or something. And what they're describing isn't that, it's something different. So they think, well, I'm having this panic attack is this really, really awful thing. And what I'm having isn't quite that. And sometimes when someone knows, I am having a panic attack, that does fall within the sort of description of that, it can allow them to, well, different things for different people, but sometimes that could allow someone to take what they're going through more seriously in terms of like, oh, this is something quite challenging that I'm encountering. I'm not going to be so hard on myself, right? Or I'm going to give myself the time and space I need to learn how to move away from this, because this isn't like just some low level thing that I ought to be able to cope with. This is actually a really hard thing. So I need to give myself the time and the learning to know how to approach this and how to move away from it, kind of thing. Or sometimes it might be about other people. So sometimes I've worked with teenagers, and sometimes that word panic attack is quite useful, because almost once the parents realise that the teenager is having a panic attack, they can almost take it a bit more seriously, or, are more allowing of, okay, so maybe there needs to be some work here, or, I can see that actually it does make sense for you to be practicing breathing, and I get why you need to do this and that and the other, right? So sometimes we're almost not giving like mental health stuff enough significance or enough, and there can be a certain weight to that word that can be helpful in certain situations, right? So it's all about, is it useful or is it not? Is it serving me to use it or not? And that might change also as your journey with this goes on. Quite often at the end of working with someone, I find that they don't like using those words panic attack at all. Not always. Sometimes people do. Sometimes people are just like, oh, it's great that I'm not having panic attacks anymore. And they're still using the same language, but it doesn't describe their experience anymore, which is great, right? Some people get to the end of working with me and they are feeling calm and confident and amazing, most of the time, and they don't even really want to use that panic attack because they feel like that doesn't really even describe what was happening. That's more what I thought was happening before I started doing the therapy, and actually it's more like that was just anxiety, right? Or that was just adrenaline, or they're using different language because they do feel different, because there's something has shifted and because they do feel different about it. But that's the other way around, right? That's not them kind of changing the language to help them feel different. That's just like they've done all this deep work to feel really different, and then almost the same language doesn't apply or doesn't make sense to them in the same way. So I find that really interesting. And I think the thing is that language is so different for different people, and we all have these different associations with language and with words. So that's just some stuff to think about, really, and to maybe just play around with a bit. How is it helpful for you to talk about it and to think about it? And that might be different with different people or in different situations. Okay, so the next video is, why do people have panic attacks? Just to give you a bit of background on that. And if you like these videos, do please like the video and subscribe beneath, and I'll see you in the next video.